Funding for this program is provided by Bruce Foods Corporation, makers of the complete line of Cajun King seafood seasoning mixes and other distinctive Louisiana-style food products.
Louisiana. Hello, I'm Chef John Folse, welcoming you to this great state of ours. We're real proud of our people, places, and food, and I'd like for you to know a little bit more about it. So join me and some of my friends as we visit the historical food towns of this state and cook up another great Taste of Louisiana. Welcome everybody to a Taste of Louisiana. I'm Chef John Folse, and boy am I happy you decided to stop and visit with me today, because we're going to take a trip to some of the historical food towns of Louisiana. Fact is, today we're going to go up to Sabine Parish in and around the area of Toledo Bend, Louisiana, one of the great beautiful lakes in our state. And there's a tremendous amount of beauty up in North Louisiana. Fact is, we're taking a shot right here of Hodges Gardens. This is the longleaf pine in the rolling hills of Hodges Gardens. Hodges Gardens was opened in 1956 by Mr. A.J. Hodges Sr., and it was called the Garden in the Forest. And today, people come from all over the world in the springtime for Easter sunrise services held right here on this 300-acre lake, right in the middle of Hodges Gardens, right next to the beautiful rose gardens and sculptured hedges that you're looking at right here. This is one of the most beautiful places in Louisiana, it's been said, and each year over 75,000 tulips are planted right in this garden. Cascading waterfalls. You saw that beautiful Spanish moss just a second ago growing from that tree. That's all over that part of Louisiana in the spring. This is the fall. You see the changing of the leaves, and look at these beautiful pyracantha berries. Somebody told me this was an endangered species now. I don't know if that's true or not. Look at the tulips. Can you imagine 75,000 of them being planted every year? Tourists coming from everywhere to get a little shot of it. And look at this petrified forest located right in the middle of the 1,400-acre Hodges Gardens. Toledo Bend, the largest man-made lake in the South. This lake, it was finished in 1968 right on the Sabine River, and it's 80 miles long and has 1,200 miles of shoreline, over half of it located right in the state of Louisiana. This is one of the last company-owned towns in Louisiana. Beautiful little fisher owned by Longleaf Lumber Company. This was an original painting of the town when it opened back in the late 1800s. The town is being restored. It's on the National Register. This is the old Opera House. And even today, there are plays being held in this Opera House, so you might want to check out Fisher, Louisiana. This is the town itself, and there's about 5 or 6 buildings that's being restored right at this minute. Silk Stocking Row. This is where all the wealthy and the people who actually ran the lumber company lived. Here's one of those beautiful homes. You can see just how nice it is with the picket fences and the little wooden sidewalks. One of the most intriguing spots of North Louisiana is Fort Jessup, and Fort Jessup was commissioned in the early 1800s by Zachary Taylor. You see old Rough and Ready, our 12th president. These pilings used to hold up the barracks of the over 700 men that lived on Fort Jessup. The old outdoor kitchen. Fact is, this is the original kitchen that was used in the 1820s to 30s when Fort Jessup was around. This is where the men used to eat. This is in that kitchen. I tell you, I walked in there and I could have gone back in history a couple hundred years. I love open hearth cooking, and this old 7-foot fireplace is original to 1822 when Fort Jessup was first built. All of the bowls and implements that were actually used at Fort Jessup were manufactured right on the site, as well as the food. People would go out, the troops would go out and harvest the game and whatever they would need to create a great meal for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Imagine feeding 700 men out of that kitchen. I'm going to do a great dish that originated right in that little old kitchen that you're looking at right now at Fort Jessup, Louisiana. Can you imagine that? North Louisiana, some of the most beautiful scenery in the world. Imagine Hodges Gardens. Just to walk around there and look at the herbs and the flowers that were growing, I could have spent a lifetime there. But to walk in the kitchen at Fort Jessup and to talk a little bit about the foods that were created back then really gets those creative juices flowing. And visiting with me just a little bit later, right here in the kitchen, is a great friend of mine, Barney Miller. And Barney lives on Toledo Bend, and I tell you what, he and I are going to talk a lot about, he's a historian and a lot of other things, so he's going to come and visit, and we're going to have a great, great time. So what foods would have been cooked in that little area of North Louisiana, right on the Texas border that kept Louisiana and Texas separated? Well, I know one thing. You saw Toledo Bend, all 184,000 surface acres of that lake produces about 300 pounds of game fish per acre. If you're a fisherman, you want to go and pull the boat right to Toledo Bend right now, because I'm going to tell you there's great fishing there. And the first dish that I want to do for you today is a dish that originated on the Toledo Bend area, but also gets some of its flavor out of Fisher, because I've got a good friend there by the name of Sarah, and they have a little herb farm. And the herb farm is called Self's Herb Farm. And Mr. and Mrs. Self runs that little farm and gave me a lot of herbs to use. I want to use their herbs on this beautiful largemouth bass from Toledo Bend. I want you to take a look at this fish. This has got to be, I don't know how many pounds this is, a couple pounds for sure. But I'm going to cook this fish and make a nice sauce to go with it, and we're going to talk about the fish in just a minute. But let's go ahead and crank up my old black skillet, because I've got to make a great Spanish-style sauce. And I say Spain because this is a Spanish territory, a lot of Spanish influence in that area, Louisiana. And when Barney comes out, we're going to talk to him about it. Into my skillet, well, what should we start with? Obviously, a little butter, and this is a little buttery flavored oil. You can find it in the store under a lot of different names, but it's just low cholesterol type oil. And these black skillets, as you know, cook very, very hot. So I'm going to get that fire up and begin to make basically a marinara sauce or a tomato sauce, but a very simple tomato sauce that was made in the early days of Louisiana back on Toledo Bend with the Spanish. A little onions, a little celery, of course, all those great Louisiana flavors into the pot naturally. A little green onions and a touch of garlic naturally. We have to have a little garlic, as you well know. So I'm going to put some garlic in there. A couple of bay leaves. And this is a very, very quick sauce. You don't have to, let me get one of my old spoons here. You don't have to cook this sauce too long, because the sauce is actually going to cook in the baking dish with the fish. So you don't have to worry about overcooking this sauce in the skillet. Just take your time and saute the vegetables nicely. And once that's done, you can dump some fresh tomatoes into it, just as the Spanish would have done many years ago. A little fresh tomatoes. I can add just a little touch of basil, a little touch of thyme, and of course use your own herbs. This is whatever you would like. The Selves gave me a lot of nice herbs to use, but whatever you like. If you like oregano, throw it in the pot, no problem. So I'll saute that around. Then a little tomato juice cocktail. Use whatever kind you would like. You can also, boy, look how hot that skillet is. Gee, that's why I love to cook in these old black iron pots, because the heat is just so tremendous. There's no doubt that these vegetables will be well sweated in just a second in that pot. Now I'm going to put a little tomato sauce. Now imagine what we have in this pot already. We have onions, celery, bell pepper, garlic. We have tomato sauce and all of those nice things, a little tomato juice cocktail. You can put some fresh tomatoes in it. And I would allow this to just sit and saute for, about 10 or 15 minutes. Not any longer, because as I say, it is going to cook more in the fish. Now for the fish itself, I'm going to take this wonderful largemouth bass of Louisiana, and I'm going to put a couple of cut lines right through the body so that it cooks really nice and quickly. This is an herbed bass, so on the inside, a little salt, a little bit pepper, and of course, again, all your own seasonings, a little bit dried thyme, a little bit dried basil. I'm going to even put a little touch of sassafras, which is the ground sassafras leaves, a little touch of filet powder. And then the herbs. I'm going to squeeze some fresh basil into the belly of the fish, as well as some nice fresh thyme. And then under the fish, to keep it from sticking during cooking, I'm going to put some of these wonderful purple onions right underneath the body of the fish so that it can lay down on there. When I go to scoop that fish out, I want it to be able to come right out of that pot. Now, more of the basil right into the bottom of the cooking pot. A little touch of Louisiana hot sauce, Louisiana Gold, whatever you would like to use. A little bit Worcestershire sauce. And then, of course, more herbs. I'm putting fresh thyme and then some nice fresh dill. All of these things grown in any yard, anywhere, any herb garden in Louisiana. So let me take my tomato sauce now, shake it around. I'm going to pour this right on top of the fish. Boy, I tell you, just take a look at that if you would. Now, you know, that's almost pretty enough to eat as is. That fish is almost pretty enough to eat. All you need is a little wasabi vinegar or something and go right after it. I'll also put a little touch of salt and pepper over the sauce, since I really didn't season it when it was in the oven, not before it goes into the oven. So what I'll do now is to take the fish, put it in the oven, and bake it at about 350 degrees. You can cover it with a little foil if you'd like for a minute, and then let this thing cook for about 15 minutes at 350, 375, somewhere like that, until it's done. Some people like fish rare, some like it well done, so the longer it needs to cook, you'll know that for your own family. Now, I have some already done, so I'm going to move this little piece of fish down under the counter. I'm going to put my nice platter here because I have to serve this fish up for you. Let me go get it out of the oven. I have one already finished. Boy, I tell you, wait till you get a look at this. Take a look at that baked fish while I close this oven door. Is that beautiful or what? That is a really nice fish. Look at that, how nice and plump it is, and you have to be real careful as you take it out because it'll break it every time. And then I'll take the fish and put it right onto the counter, right onto the bowl. Look how nice that looks. And then maybe a little sauce on top of it. You want to definitely put all of this sauce around the fish, but you get the general idea. And look how nice that is. You can finish garnishing it any way you want, including maybe even some nice fresh dill right on top of the fish. Isn't that fantastic? Take a look at that. Great. Now, we'll move that out of the way. The second dish that I want to do for you today, and I tell you, I've got my mess everywhere, so I've got to clean it up. The next dish that I want to do for you is a dish that definitely came out of the lumber camps of Fisher as well as Old Fort Jessup. And this is a dish that we refer to today as lumberjack stew. Now, lumberjack stew is a stew that's made with any kind of game or any kind of domestic meats. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to use chicken and veal shank today, and I'm going to start off by taking another one of my old black iron pots, and I'm going to fire this thing up so we can get it started. And what I would do would be to take the veal shank, which takes a good long time to cook. This veal shank will boil and make a wonderful stock with all of the marrow that's in the bones. So you want to put this veal shank into a pot, brown it lightly, and cover it with stock as I will, and let this cook for about an hour or so to tenderize the meat. At the same time, you would want to put the parts of a really nice baking hen. A baking hen takes a long time to cook, but you can use game like pheasant or duck or anything else that'll take as long to cook as the veal shank itself. Of course, in the lumberjack stew, they needed things with a lot of different body to it, things that would put muscle on those men. So white beans and red beans and cabbages and carrots and potatoes were all a major part of the lumberjack stew. And the way that's made, and you can make this at home using, as I say, any type of game or domestic meat. I'm going to put a little bit oil down into the black iron pot, and this pot is just about hot already. You can see how hot these things cook from the way that tomato sauce cooked just a minute ago. And then I'll season the meats, a little pepper, a little salt. Again, you can put a little hot sauce on it if you would like, but naturally all of the flavors that you yourself like to use. A little thyme, a little basil, right down into the meat, and I can shake that around, and then I would put it down into the skillet, into the black iron pot, and I would saute this until it's just kind of whited out, not necessarily golden brown, because this is a stew that's going to braise for a long time. So as you can see, it's going to start to cook nicely in the bottom of the pot. Once it's whited out, as I call it, once it kind of gets opaque in color, then I would add all of the flavorings down into it. Again, we're cooking in Louisiana, so we would notice how important measurements are here. A couple half handfuls is what I'm using today. A couple half handfuls of the wonderful celery. And you can tell that this is going to be a great dish already just by all of the ingredients that are going down into the pot. Onion, celery, bell pepper, naturally, again, a little bit garlic, because you want that good flavor. You have to remember that lumberjacks, as well as militiamen in Fort Jessup, didn't have a lot of variety in their meals, so they were looking for something that really had tremendous flavor. So to be able to put things like onion, celery, bell pepper, dried beans, red and black, to help thicken the dish. They didn't have brown roux in those days. A little potatoes and carrots, all down into the bottom of the pot. And then, let me move this out of the way. And then once this would be cooking for about 15 or 20 minutes or so, we would add a really nice chicken stock, beef stock. You put this down in there like this. Nice beef stock or chicken stock, any one you have, or just you can add water, of course, and put a cover on it and let this stew cook until the beans actually act as the thickening agent down into the pot. Of course, for flavor, I would wait right toward the end to flavor it, and with the salt and peppers and different herbs that I wanted to put into the pot, because the meat is already seasoned. Now let me show you what this looks like. I got to show you something that's already done. I'll tell you, you're going to love this dish. Look how it cooks. Once it's been cooking for about an hour and a half to 2 hours, take a look at that lumberjack stew, if you would. And I know I've got a little bowl. I want to dish a little bit of this up for you so you can see what it looks like. Take a look at that stew. And see how thick the beans and the vegetables. You can put any kind of vegetable you want into it. You can see the potatoes. The meat starts to fall off of the bone. And what you have is a wonderful, wonderful lumberjack stew. Let me put this down right here, put a little garnish on it, a little parsley, a little purple cabbage, and you can just imagine the troops sitting down to a plate of that wonderful stew, whether it was venison or whether it was pork or beef or anything else. So I'll just put that right out of the way. Now, you know, I have a couple other dishes I want to show you, but I told you a couple of minutes ago that I had a great friend of mine, Barney Miller, come in to visit with me from Toledo Bend. And Barney is a historian, he's a photographer, he's a writer, a journalist. He does hey, Barney, I'm just talking about you. Come on in. How you doing? Great to see you. I want to tell my friends out here, I spent one of the greatest days on Toledo Bend with this guy right here. And, hey, talking about Toledo Bend, what do you have?
Well, we knew we were coming down here, so we went out last night and got you a mess of crappie. You call them sac-a-lait, I think, down here.
Look at the
that's
size.
Fresh out of Toledo Bend.
Look at the size of that crappie. Now, this is a crappie or sac-a-lait. I'm going to put this down right here. You got to take a look at this. And the fact is, we're going to fry this in just a second. Since you brought it, we're going to go ahead and cook it. But that's so that came right off of Toledo Bend.
Yes,
You're living on Toledo Bend right now.
That's right.
Let me ask you a question. I was stunned to find once I got up there and walked the lake and fished on it a little while that was actually a man-made lake between the state of Texas and state of Louisiana came together to make that lake happen, didn't it?
Yes, they did. They built a dam on the Sabine River at a place called Toledo Bend, which got its name from the city of Toledo in Spain because of the similarity of the cliffs and everything in that area. And so that's how Toledo Bend was formed and how it got its name.
And there's a big hydroelectric dam on that lake today, and I understand that the funds from the electric dam is actually what pays for all the improvements on that lake.
That's right. The electricity is sold to 3 utility companies, and the money is used for retiring the bonds that were used to build the lake, plus all the improvements and things that are made there.
You mentioned a minute ago Toledo being from Spain. I noticed here in South Louisiana we have a tremendous Cajun and Creole influence. Naturally, the Spanish were here in New Orleans. Why the heavy Spanish influence in North Louisiana? Why is it so I guess it's everywhere today. It's still
well, primarily in late 1600s, Spanish missionaries out of Mexico City began establishing a line of missions all the way through South Texas, East Texas, and even into Louisiana, about 35 miles at a place called Los Adayes. And they established these Spanish missions and pueblos or forts all along this area to protect their territory. So in that area was a predominant Spanish settlement.
And you know, you were telling me a story about a neutral ground that originated there before Fort Jessup came in, and that every outlaw and bandit in the world came to that section because neither Spain nor Louisiana actually owned the area.
Yeah, that's right. And that came about as a result of the Louisiana Purchase. The border between Spain and the United States was very nebulous in the Louisiana Purchase, and so there became a great dispute between the government of Spain and the United States about where that western border was. Spain claimed over the other side of Los Adayes, as I said, about 35 miles east of the Sabine River. The United States wanted to set it at the Sabine River. So due to some other intrigues that were going on about that time, some very important historical events, Thomas Jefferson said, make an accommodation with the Spaniards on the Sabine. So what he did was to go there and make an agreement that they would establish a no man's land or a neutral ground over which neither nation would exercise jurisdiction.
And that was right here in Louisiana.
That was right here in Louisiana. Yes, it was.
You know, sometimes I think we still have that neutral ground here in Louisiana.
And some of the outlaws do.
That's right. You know, you brought some of this wonderful, wonderful crappie, and what I would like to do is to fry some, because when we were on the lake, we actually had some of this great fried crappie, and I want to show all of our friends out here how we actually did that.
Okay,
so I want you to whip that up. Yeah. I'm going to put a little bit, one egg in there.
Okay.
And then as you mix that around, I'm going to put a little bit cream. I think that's exactly what you did. We're making the batter here. Mm-hmm. And then into that a little bit Creole mustard. Now, you know, a lot of people do mustard battered fish. A lot of people do it, but very few people use the Creole mustard of Louisiana. This is the flavored mustard that's created in the city of New Orleans, but a lot of Spanish influence in the Creole mustard, a lot of Spanish herbs. So I thought it would be fitting, because I do use a lot of the Creole mustard in my batter. So into the egg and milk, this is basically an egg wash or an egg batter. I'm going to put a little bit of that wonderful, wonderful Creole mustard. Now, while you're whipping that up, oh, by the way, I have to put a little lemon juice, and I want to show you this because this is so doggone interesting. This is an old 1830s, we talk about Fort Jessup, this is an old 1830s lemon squeezer, and we put the lemon right into the inside of it, basically, and then we take it and squeeze the juice right down into, look at that, 1830, it's still working. They probably had one like this at Fort Jessup. Okay, now I'm going to take my egg, flour. Now this is actually corn flour, and I want to show quickly something that the Spanish brought here to create this cornmeal or corn flour. And this is it right here. It's an old corn grinder where the kernels of corn would be put onto the surface of rock and then actually ground by hand, and that would have created this wonderful corn flour or corn meal that we're using on the fish today. This dates back to
a couple of hundred years ago.
late 1700s. The Spanish actually carried this to Louisiana. I thought that we'd like to show that for a minute. Okay, now let's fry that crappie if we can. I'm going to go ahead and move my little fryer. This fryer, for perfect frying, you should get the oil up to 375 degrees, and I'll move that right here. And then we can take some of those fillets of fish. Let's just grab a couple of them and put in here, and I'll batter them. And the thing about fish, they'll fry in just a minute. It doesn't take very long, especially when the fillets of fish are so nice and white and small, just like this. We can put it in and batter it up. And if you batter them, I'll go ahead and, well, look how nice that corn flour is. And I don't like a really, really thick batter either. And I'm going to put it right down into the cornmeal, just like that, the corn flour. And that mustard will give the fish a really nice tangy flavor, almost like as if you'd have put extra lemon in it. And that's what I really like about that Creole mustard down into the dish. Let me get us a little towel here. Barney, one other good question. The towns of North Louisiana, I thought towns in South Louisiana had strange names. You know, when you get to Plaquemine and you get to the towns, well, in North Louisiana you have Natchitoches, which of course is an Indian name, but there's some towns up there that I can't quite figure out where the names come from, like Zwally and these towns. Well, tell me a little bit about that.
Well, that territory was opened up mainly to the lumbering industries in the late 1900s when Fisher was built.
Right.
And it was opened up by a group of investors and people from the Netherlands. So most of the towns along the line, or a lot of the towns along the line, like Zwolle, De Quincy, De Ridder, De Kalb, Arkansas, various places like that are out of those Netherlands countries, names out of Holland. So that's how some of those towns got their name.
Now, you know, I know that there's a couple really great festivals that take place up in your part of the country every year. Fact is, you invited me to one that's called Sawmill Days in Fisher, and I guess that's an appropriate name for an old sawmill town. But there's about 3 major festivals that go on in and around the Hodges Gardens area, right?
Yeah, that's right.
What are they?
There are 3, and they commemorate important periods in that history. One, as you mentioned, was the Sawmill Days Festival, which is held every spring, commemorating the period of the lumbering days that were so important in the early 1900s. Another is the Free State Festival, which commemorates the period of the neutral ground in the Free State area.
Right.
And a third one is the Zwolle Tamale Fiesta, which commemorates the Spanish influence.
And I guarantee you I'm going to be at least at one of those this year, if not all 3. Barney,
well, we'll sure we're
going to eat some of this fish in just a minute. I appreciate you coming and visit with us so much today. It's great, and I can't wait to get back to Toledo Bend. And I want to tell everybody out there, thank you for coming to visit as we look at these historical food towns, and come back as we continue to cook up more of these great Taste of Louisiana. Let's try some of this fish right now.
Funding for this program was provided in part by Bruce Foods Corporation, makers of Bruce's Yams and other distinctive Louisiana-style food products.
Chef John Folse has written a cookbook that allows you to explore the exciting world of Louisiana cuisine. The Evolution of Cajun and Creole Cuisine is a full-color, 352-page book containing food history and recipes for gumbo, jambalaya, makshu, and other Cajun dishes. For your copy, send a check or money order for $24.95 to Louisiana Public Broadcasting at the address on your screen. To use your credit card, call toll-free 1-800-973-7246 or visit our website at lpb.org.